having worked with design people for, 30 years plus, I've really learned from all of them, like they can be just looking for a stitch on a sweater that's this big. And so for me, I'm like laser focused on items like it can be just completely plain sweater, but it has this one really amazing little stitch that, can be translated into some very modern piece of clothing. Print, the pattern, the design detail. So I'm not really a purist. I'm after everything that's beautiful. That's all I do is what's beautiful. I'm David Brockman. I'm the owner of Honeymoon Antiques Ltd, which is a New York City-based design inspiration studio. And I'm also the owner of the Sturbridge Show, which takes place in Sturbridge, Massachusetts, and in New York City. I was a mid-century modern furniture dealer in the beginning.
Okay.
But I have had very many hats. I worked in the film industry as a film scenic. And then I decided that after my last big film job, which was the kind of one of the last Robert Altman films that shot in Kansas City, it was really hard to do. And it actually happened that on that Altman film I was working on, I had one 5-hour a day, maybe Sunday for 5 hours, and I went thrifting and I just bought massive amounts of stuff while I was there. And then I was like, well, my mom, will you help me start a store? And I started this little tiny store on Avenue B. And then this was so interesting to me because I had clothing in the shop, and my friend Claudia, who's a really famous graffiti artist, female graffiti artist, Claw Money, her and I did this first show together at the Metropolitan Pavilion, and it was like, oh, this is what we should be doing, because like Calvin Klein and Donna Karan and Ralph Lauren, they walked through and they bought everything in the place. And I think we made like that first show like some unheard of money of like 10 grand between the two of us. And I was like, forget about the furniture. Let's go for this. Because, I kind of understood it. Like, yeah. I understood what they were looking for immediately. Not that I was an expert, but I understood what was cool about a pair of shoes or a wash on denim. So yeah, that's kind of how it happened.
That's great.
35 years later, here we are.
If you were to distinguish a bit, contrast Brimfield from Sturbridge, what are those sort of the contrasting markers to you?
Well, Sturbridge, first of all, is inside in a controlled environment, and it's one day, and it is relatively civilized. Brimfield has become very wild. I mean, it's really wild. You're out in a field, you're out in crazy weather, you don't know what's happening, you don't know what's going to happen. But it's the hunt. Yeah. Brimfield is the hunt, though. My thing is very, very curated. It has to be the word used. I hate to use the word curated, but the Sturbridge Show is a very curated event. Everyone in that show has a really distinct point of view, and they bring it every single time. Brimfield, there can just be any dude pull up with a truck and throw it on the ground. You have no idea what you're going to find there. You might find nothing, but you also can find something always. I mean, there's legendary stories of the end of the week, some guy pulling up with a truckload of 1920 sneakers. You just don't know. I will give you a really funny example.
Yeah, tell me.
And I won't tell the doctor's name. But I recently went to the doctor for something, and it was all fine. And then the first thing he said to me was, well, what do you do? And I'm like, oh, I'm a clothing dealer. And you on the Sturbridge Show. He already knew who I was by my name.
Yeah.
And he told me a story, which I actually witnessed. He's the largest collector of Bakelite jewelry in the world, I think, at this point. He told me a story of taking a ladder and hiding it and putting it over the fence at Mays. This is a prominent New York City doctor who hid a ladder, put it on the fence, and climbed the fence and jumped over the fence to get to the tables, and 5 other people followed him.
That's insane.
So it's not really any different. It's just younger people who can run faster, I think. But I kind of couldn't believe it because I actually witnessed this. It was the first time I was at the Fields Maze at Brimfield, it doesn't allow you to unpack until the gate opens. So you have to really go for it. And I was in the back corner of the field because it was my first time there. I had like one of the worst spots. And I saw these people coming over the fence on a ladder. And it happened to be the doctor, which is small world, right?
That's insane.
I think people sneak in trunks of cars. I think they put themselves in bags. I mean, it's kind of insane. It's like, again, like I mentioned before we started the interview, this isn't like King Tut's tomb or Giacometti sculptures or the cure for cancer. This is like old clothes people are doing this for. These are probably 1880s, 1890s. They have incredible prints. Again, this is like a good example of like, I would have bought this even if it was falling to bits, but I mean, it has some beautiful design details on it. It has beautiful ribbing, really beautiful ruffle details, incredible print, beautiful details on this, it's got a beautiful sleeve. Sometimes I'll buy something just for a sleeve. And this is a beautiful sleeve with a fine little tight ruffled cuff, like beautiful back detail. This on a jacket, on a men's jacket would be like a buckle back kind of situation. This is, gives some form and shape. This one's falling apart more than this one, which is actually out like of a private collection, that she could have bought this dress. Why, it's in surprisingly good condition. She could have bought this maybe even in the early 60s because she was a Victorian collector. So, something like this at that time could have been in the thrift store, where you would have bought it in a thrift store and it wouldn't have been expensive. It would have just, and been in amazing condition. But again, like all beautiful details, ruffle details, beautiful belt details.
David, so I know that a lot of the items you have, especially some of these more rare ones, it's hard to put a price tag on them. But for maybe a collector, what's the range that they'd be looking at when it comes to maybe acquiring a piece like this?
This dress I rented to a designer, so it's like now in my private collection. I won't sell it because also something about it. I have my parents' farm in Missouri now, and I would just hang this in the house. I think it's like also very it'll look great in this room of all these old wood wallpapers I have. This at a high point a few years ago, I probably could have sold for $1,200, $1,500, $1,800. This is more like, now probably like probably up between 6 and 8 on it, because I've had it for a while. I understand it now. I would be ready to go, let it go. Some things I don't really like have an easy time letting go of. Like, I photographed this so much now, I understand it. Also, I'm at a point where I really have to downsize all of this. So I can't be a hoarder anymore.
Yeah. What is it about nostalgia that draws so many people towards it? Why is nostalgia in such high demand?
Because we're at the end of the world. Because it's not nice out there and people want to escape. It's like going to a beautiful movie. I really kind of think somehow it's a little bit like that. People are in denial about the reality around us. Nostalgia is a very complicated thing, because a little bit of a 60s thing gives you kind of a soundtrack, like nostalgia can create a soundtrack for people, like can make them interested in music. I had a funny thing over the weekend at the Vintage Con where these two young, really, really young kids that were the interns, I came up and I said, do you know what what Tribe Called Quest is sampling here? And they were like, what? And I was like, it's the Velvet Underground.
Yeah.
And it was like that moment of like, oh, well, maybe they would actually go and listen to that music.
Exactly.
And that would be then they'd have something new to listen to that's, because to listen to that's nostalgic also. That's like 20 years ago. It's...
What does the future of vintage and to a greater extent nostalgia look like to you?
Well, vintage can be trendy. So having been in this business for a long time, I've seen it come and I've seen it go. And I feel like probably a little bit soon it's going to go, because it's also being marketed. It's like, like everybody in a band t-shirt, I'm constantly asking people, a song from that band? And they're like, or over the weekend, I was like, oh, look at that dude wearing the Rolling Stones t-shirt.
Yeah.
He loves it for the graphic. He has no idea what the Rolling Stones are. So it's a little bit all over the place. But again, like the future of vintage, well, hopefully you guys can create some sort of scenes that it's more related to and isn't like being marketed from H&M to young people to wear it.
You're so right about that. It exists in like this weird vacuum, which doesn't really give it legs.
No, because then it's just trend and it's just trendy.
Yeah.
Like I don't know how you find your tribe, based on this, because everyone looks the same.
Yeah.
Which is a little bit disturbing to me, because you can be in Kansas City, Missouri, you can be in New York, and everybody looks exactly the same now.
So do you think vintage is a trend, or is it here to stay?
Oh, no, it's a trend right now, but of course it's here to stay. It's old clothes. People are always going to, for various reasons, like not having the money, are going to go thrifting because they need clothes, all the young, which most of them are all rich looking for in New York City, to be a cynical New Yorker. They're going around the corner to those resale shops around the corner and paying $48 for a shirt that they could have, if they made a little effort, go to Goodwill or whatever and find for $12, because it's all just copies of a copy of a copy of a copy anyway. Doesn't matter what it is, if it has a label or not. When I went around the corner, I was looking at plaid shirts that was like, oh my God, this is like a H&M version of the 1950s shirt.
Yeah.
And this is like the version of the Pendleton shirt. It's like they were all there in a timeline of like, well, that one's kind of real at 60s, little bit like, like a printed check. And then we get to the H&M version, which is just like this really gross polyester mass-produced thing. It looks like that one.
I want to ask you about that too. Is the fast fashion-ication of vintage something that's disturbing to you? Like you said, H&M tapping into the old Pendletons, or PacSun tapping into old vintage Banty designs. What does that mean to you? I think it's terrible, because it's terrible for the planet. I mean, it's just like, this needs to stop, all this making of garbage clothes. I mean, there's enough garbage clothes already on the planet. Nobody needs to, those kind of companies all need to be boycotted. It's all culture vulture stuff, it's like, all right, so some scouts have been out for Zara looking at kids in the street, or, on the high level, you have Gucci's whole Williamsburg moment, where it's like they're just in Williamsburg taking pictures of people in their styling. It's all, that even had a name, like at one point when Alessandro first started doing Gucci, it was like, it just looks all like girls, like kooky girls in Williamsburg putting clothes together, mismatching clothes. Magpie. Yeah. Brooklyn Magpie. I think that's what it was called. Williamsburg Magpie. Yeah. It was like, that's also disturbing to me. Yeah. It's like, make some effort. Vintage is just always important, because not to, burst the bubble of the fashion designer, but there's a very short period of time now between seasons and seasons. If you didn't have vintage, you wouldn't be able. There's no way there's enough time to sit down, draw it, mock it up, get it to a factory and get it done. It's like really important to have something to start with. Yeah. To rig from, to mood board from, and to make something new. But I think the most kind of exciting clothing always has some sort of backstory to it, a mood. I'm always having to explain this to people with what I do, because they're like, what is it that you do? And I'm like, I just kind of create, like, present things that give people a feeling of a nostalgia or a mood or a feeling or beauty, So, fringe workwear is coming in and out of
of fashion a lot for design, and I mean, it's currently very, very popular. But about 15 years ago, I started selling French items again. That I was probably one of those few people doing it at the time again. So I was going to London to source other kinds of things. I met this woman in London. She was an English woman living in the south of France and was a French workwear dealer. So these items I have now are the pieces that I kept out of her own personal collection, because they had such a great story that I'm not going to sell them, and they're now part of my little French personal French collection. But these were all field worker dresses. They were all from one family who were, as she described, extremely, extremely poor, and the clothing in the family would have a whole history of being reduced down as it went along from adult to children. So some of the items I'll show you are children's clothing out of this collection, but I mean, they're incredible, thin, beautiful cotton dresses that have been worn to death, but it has incredible, incredible repairs, French repairs all over it, which is, like different than Japanese, but in the same sort of technique of reweaving. But this has just absolutely beautiful repairs. And I don't think you find so many things like this around anymore. These are other examples from that same woman or that same family that have all these black on black fabrics. I mean, all the repairs inside can just blow my mind. This stuff I still have such a passion for and a love of. A really good repair. This one also I think is just amazing too. It's like a funny wrap dress, but with all these different patches. This, she told me, had been the father's suit. And as it fell apart, the mom remade his suit into this pair of pants for the boy. This was an adult piece of clothing that I can see that she was a pretty good sewer, but that she took apart and sized down for the child. And then, of course, it has these incredible big butt repairs that are out of something, like another piece of clothing. These two were the dad's. I forgot I even had these here. These were the dad's pants too, that she sized down to fit the kids. You can kind of feel that these were, an adult pair of pants, because the scale of this is a little bit too big for a boy's pants. So I would want a lot for these. I would want like 1,500. That's the only way I would maybe part with them. Same with these. These dresses are really, really super conceptually too. I would want $2,500.
They're incredible.
Dresses. Yeah, I just think they're incredible. I don't know that anybody would pay it, or I don't know if anyone would understand it, but that's what I would want. Yeah.
So you've had a lot of experience working with some of the largest designers in the world. Some names you could mention, some names you can't probably.
Right.
But talk to us about the experience, what it's like working with a lot of these designers, how collaborative that process is, and how you get a bit of insight into their eye when it comes to what you're able to source for them and what they find with you.
Well, which I won't mention to anybody, but there's certain kind of codes, house codes. So if you understand like a house code, you can kind of just feed them. I mean, one of the bigger companies in New York for years and years and years, I just sort of fed them stuff, like me and many other people, because it was a machine. We were just feeding them ideas all over and over and over. Europeans are much more difficult,
really,
because they have their house codes too, but someone like Saint Laurent, when he isn't doing the design, it's a new person with a different point of view. So that just became, again, me always wanting to buy things that were really beautiful for one reason or another. Because I'm more a women's focused dealer. So, I was just going for beautiful shape, beautiful silhouettes, beautiful fabrics, beautiful combinations of things. So, they either tap into what you have or they don't. You either have what they want or you don't have what they want. You just have to not take it personal.
So reverting back a little bit to some of your work with more larger name brand designers, I know that you've got a particular soft spot in your heart for sort of like peak 90s Helmut Lang, especially in New York.
Right.
I'd love for you to talk to us a little bit about what that was like, if you had the chance to work with the team over there. But yeah.
Well, that would be the one thing I would talk about. Just naming someone would be like working with Helmut Lang, and specifically working, having known Melanie Ward, who was like the stylist and the inspiration shopper for Helmut, and just just knowing, having interactions with her, and the translation of having really classic New York design people that they would buy like a Narelle thing, or they would buy, a Jeffrey Bean thing, but it would never be that. It was really like not like a copy of any of that. They would take something about that and deconstruct it and make it. And maybe it was just a pocket detail or a color combination. That was incredible to work with Melanie, and she's an incredible stylist, a legend. And then, of course, I covered all the Helmut Lang things that I find. It's like really, Helmut Lang is really someone that's really, Margiela and Helmut Lang are really, really important, but I almost don't feel like they're important enough now. Like there's so much bad, copies of their things, really stolen things that people have made whole brands based on. That's all just stolen from them. But I don't think. I know Martin Margiela wouldn't care, and I know Helmut Lang doesn't care because they've gone on to do other things.
Yeah.
So,
David, on that note, we appreciate you.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks
Mr.
for
David
listening to my
Brockman.
babble.
And it was not babble. It was amazing. You could always catch him here at his showroom or at the Sturbridge Show. An amazing show. We're excited. Bidstitch Gang will be going to the next one. Once again, sir, thank you so much.
Thank you.